Imagine being a god who is entrusted with making sure that all the various souls of an entire world all made their way safely to the underworld. Now imagine if all of a sudden the underworld just got all loose and let everybody start leaving. How would you feel? Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to talk about Theros, the man, or I suppose really God, in charge of ensuring safe passage of the dead to the underworld, right? That's what we're going to talk about, and the reason we're going to talk about it is because there is a brand new card from Theros Beyond Death, specifically the Buy a Box promo, that features Theros in a new incarnation. So what I thought it would be cool to do is take a look at the previous version of him, talk about the cards in Magic, because there's only a few that are associated with him, and overall dive into the entire history of Theros along with what's going on with him now. And that's why I've gathered you all here at the Temple of Silence. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first version of Theros to start out with, because it makes sense to start at the beginning. So we have Theros in his incarnation of God of Passage. And if you don't know really what the idea behind Theros is he was designed based on Greek mythology. There is the ferryman. It's a well-known sort of trope that they use in a number of different stories because it's a cool concept, right? You have a barge or some other sort of vessel that needs to be guided by a mystical being that can take people from the land of the living to the land of the dead. And in ancient, like, Greek mythology, they would place a coin in the mouth or on the mouth of departed people so that they would be able to pay the cost of the ferryman. Now, the different scenario is with Theros, where essentially it's similar because it's inspired by it. So he doesn't specifically take coins from people. What happens is in this religion on Theros, or mythology, however you want to look at it, what they do is they craft clay masks for anybody who has passed on. And that clay mask is supposed to crystallize the persona of the person, the essence, I should say, of the person. And that way Theros can mark them out and take them on his way. But he doesn't actually ferry the boat. What he does is he lays his gigantic wooden staff down on the waters, and it magically forms a ship that will transport the newly dead across the rivers that ring the world, which is pretty cool. That's a pretty cool term right there, the rivers that ring the world. So, Theros is responsible for the safe passage of the dead. The first incarnation that we see of him is 1 white, 1 black, and 1 colorless for a 5/4 indestructible legendary enchantment creature with the subtype of God. As long as your devotion to white and black is less than 7, Theros isn't a creature. And whenever another creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. So this is obviously a fairly potent card. 3 mana for a potential 5/4 creature that also gives you a lot of reusability with your own creatures already is pretty solid. I really enjoyed the Theros God concept with devotion being equal to the number of mana symbols you have of any particular color. So he already brings some of his own devotion, which is it is a little bit weird that gods can contribute to their own belief. That part is a little bit tweaky, but overall, I do like the idea that you need to have a certain amount of white and black devotion before he can materialize. Instead of just being a concept, he can physically arise. And obviously you need him to physically arise so that he can help to transport the people to where they're supposed to go, right? I can't imagine what happens to a soul that is stuck in the land of the living. They need to be ferried over to the land of the unliving, right? Where they still kind of have life because of the underworld concept. It's really funky, right? You've got the clay masks and they're actually broken apart afterwards and used as currency, which is funky. Use chunks of the mask as currency because of their symbolic value. The underworld's full of gold. Nobody cares about it. They all want chunks of soul masks, which makes sense. I mean, it's not just clay, right? It's something that's intrinsic to the person who the mask is emulating. So overall, that's a funky concept. But anyways, to return to the card here, whenever another creature you own dies, return it to your hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. This is a cool way of showing that the God of Passage is on your side, where he's going to look the other way and be like, hey, you know what? I'm supposed to take this guy to the underworld. But I'll tell you what, buddy, I'll send him on back to you. Here we go. Unless your opponent's willing to essentially, I don't know, bribe Athreos? Is that what it's supposed to be? The offering of life essence to Athreos in a way of appeasing him and getting him to go like, look, man, I would have sent that guy back, but he wanted to give me, your opponent here wanted to pay me some juicy life, and you know, I got bills to pay, so I need that god life. You know what I'm saying? Either way, it's a cool concept. Honestly, being able to summon up gods at all is a cool concept where you're like, yes, the gods serve me. As a planeswalker, you're so powerful, you can go to other realms of existence and gain the services of gods, right? Because remember, I'm old school when it comes to Magic the Gathering, so I don't ascribe to this like, oh, you're summoning up construct copies. It's like, no, no, no. I'm summoning up the real god. When I am playing, like, when I am magicking and I summon up Athreos, that's me actually having the god there. It's like, boom, summon him up. Choke on that one. Anyhow, that's a neat concept. I like the idea of Athreos as the god of passage. It's illustrated, his priorities are illustrated in a number of ways, but they all basically boil down to protect and ferry the undead. Once you die, you're under the protection of Athreos, and he's going to make sure you get where you need to go. And you can see that on cards like Aegis of the Gods. 1 white, 1 colorless for a 2/1 enchantment creature, a human soldier. Actually, sorry, you know what? I don't think I actually touched on his artwork here. Let's back up to Athreos for a second, and we will talk about his actual appearance as well. Fairly briefly, though. You can see the Nixian elements that are coming up off of his body. Now, he never speaks. There's a reason the Temple of Silence is dedicated to Athreos. He never speaks. He wears grimy, beat-up garments, very much in the way that the Greek mythology holds for the ferryman as well. So he is basically like an old, kind of bent-over individual with beat-up, ratty garments who never speaks and just arranges for your travel. So, moving on back over to the Aegis of the Gods, as I was saying, it's 2 mana for a 2/1 that gives you hexproof. And the flavor text says, Athreos cares little for the other gods' conflict with mortals. He is concerned only with safe passage for the dead. So these are essentially creatures that Athreos has created out of god stuff, out of pure enchantment, to guide souls all the way over to the shores where they will safely make it and be able to transport over. And he does actually have methods to handle people who have kind of strayed, either souls that try and escape or souls that just kind of get lost along the way. He's got Underworld Sentries, or Century of the Underworld. 1 white, 1 black, and 3 colors for a 3/3 flyer with vigilance. You pay a white and a black and pay 3 life to regenerate the Century of the Underworld. And the flavor text says, when Athreos gathers the newly dead to be ferried across the 5 rivers that ring the world. I love that. The five rivers that ring the world. That's cool as a concept. He sends skeletal griffins to fetch those who stray. And so you can see these griffins are pretty ghastly. I suppose if your life's already over, I suppose they're a lot less fearsome, because it's really just, okay, they're just gonna, are they gonna fly over? How do they fly too? That's kind of cool. They don't have any feathers. But anyways, are they going to swoop down and pick you up? Are they just going to land in front of you in a warning kind of way, telling you to head backwards? It's an interesting mental exercise to try and picture exactly how they execute their duties. But again, this ties into Athreos really only caring about making sure that the dead are the ones who make the journey. And also making sure that nobody who isn't supposed to be crossing also isn't crossing. And you can see that with Grim Guardian, which is 1 black, 2 colors for a 1/4 zombie creature. When the Grim Guardian or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. I don't really know how that ties into their duties, but anyhow. The flavor text says, occasionally the living wander to the rivers, but the wardens of Athreos ensure that only the dead pass. And that makes you wonder, when it's saying, like, they make sure only the dead pass, does that mean that if you attempt to cross when you're still alive, that they will turn you away at spear tip? Or does this actually mean that they will end your life to allow you passage? It's an interesting question where it's not obvious exactly what the answer is, but I mean, we are looking at a black card, and there is a fair bit of menace in the artwork. You've got that skull aspect of the helmet and everything, and the fact that this is a enchantment creature that also happens to be a zombie. That's a nice touch. When you think of enchantment creatures, you don't really think of them having the same like death or undeath status, but I suppose as a way of ensuring that he's only dealing with the dead in the world at the edge there, that's a cool way of ensuring that it makes sense from a thematic standpoint, and I enjoy that actually. I mean, the griffin skeleton is undead, but the Aegis of the gods isn't. So when you look at them, it's like the one who's got to get them to the shores originally is not undead, but from that point onwards, once you get to the edge, basically you're going to be dealing with creatures that are not alive. And you know what I like that adds a little bit of flavor to this are the Scholars of Athreos. This is a cool concept. So Scholar of Athreos is 1 white and 2 colorless for a 1/4 human cleric. Pay a black and 2 colorless. Each opponent loses 1 life. You gain life equal to life lost this way. And the flavor text says, she asks pointed questions of the dead who wait for Athreos, learning of life from those who are about to leave it. This is a very cool concept, honestly. If you think about it, you've got these people who are at the end of their existence, and after they have shed their mortal form and now know they are heading to the other world, at this point, what do they know? What do they value as well? What knowledge can you gain from them? I mean, how many different point of views are you going to be able to encounter? Are there a bunch of overlapping concepts when it comes to people who no longer have mortal concerns? What are their regrets? Is it consistent across people? There would be an incredible amount to learn, and these people have nowhere to go, really, right? If they're just waiting on the shore to be ferried, in the meantime, they've got nowhere to go. They might be happy to tell their story to the living. Of course, they might also resent the living. There's no way to know for sure. But I also like the funky hat that this priestess is wearing here. Or it's not a priestess, I suppose. I mean, it says cleric, but it's a scholar of Athreos. Maybe it's both, right? I mean, you can see that she's clearly depicted at the Temple of Silence. So maybe you could consider this a version of Athreos' religion, right? Because he's a god who doesn't speak at all. And he doesn't really seem like the kind of god who would have like worshippers or adherents in the same fashion, because he's literally only concerned with safe passage of the dead. So why would he really care about the living in terms of them gaining knowledge or worshiping him? It has nothing to do with the sphere of his existence, right? And so this all leads us to the spoiler card that we have for today, which is Athreos Shroud Veiled. Now, you'll notice right away, actually, that the legendary frame goes pretty well with the constellation, like, Nixian enchantment style border. Those two combine awesomely to make a very striking design. So Athreos Shroud Veiled is 1 black, 1 white, 4 colorless for a 4/7 indestructible again. As long as your devotion to white and black is less than 7, he isn't a creature. At the beginning of your end step, put a coin counter on another target creature. Whenever a creature with a coin counter on it dies or is put into exile, return that card to the battlefield under your control. Now we can see a significant difference between this and the previous Athreos in that, first of all, this one costs twice as much mana to cast, right? The other one was only 3 mana and he was 5/4. This one's 4/7. So you're paying more mana for something that's slightly less aggressive, but his toughness is higher. Although, let's be real. I mean, when you've got an indestructible creature, toughness most of the time is irrelevant unless you're dealing with like -X effects. But either way, he is more hardy in that fashion. And he also has a different effect in that the previous Athreos would only allow you to get your creatures back, right? Like basically, he was a one-sided sort of setup where he would allow you to return creatures to your hand. Where this Athreos actually allows you to get creatures from both sides and put them back onto the board instead. So it feels like, from an ability standpoint, this is in some ways more powerful, and in some ways it's weaker. I mean, if you play like a full board wipe, then you're not going to be able to get like all your creatures back. You're not going to get any of your opponent's creatures. But with with this, as you get to keep adding coin counters, it can get pretty ridiculous where all of a sudden you have all the dead bound in your service. And it does make me wonder, what's Athreos' role and feelings now that Clothais has escaped from the underworld, and as a result, lots of people are coming back from the underworld? Has he just given up on what he's doing, or is he now in a more active, have to find all these dead and usher them back again? Is that the deal? I am genuinely curious to know what the current concept is behind him, because when we look at the artwork, you can see the same sort of setup. He's got his trademark gigantic serpent-headed staff that he uses to lay fairies down for the dead that need to travel. He's got the rags there, and just like the previous version, I may not have mentioned it, but both versions of him have those masks kind of hanging from his clothing as well. Not sure exactly whose masks they're supposed to be. They do look bigger than regular human masks overall in the artwork that we looked at previously. So for me, this is a very cool card. The fact that it's a buy-a-box makes me wonder if we're going to be getting any more gods that we actually already know, because we have Daxos as a demigod, we have Clothais as another god, but we haven't seen a repeat of any of the other gods yet inside the set, because the buy-a-box cards aren't available inside the set, so that does change things up slightly. So let me know what you guys think about all this. What do you think is the deal with Athreos? What do you think we're going to see in terms of other gods? Because I'm genuinely curious. Thanks for coming by and hanging out. Big shout out to my patrons and channel members. I'm going to go ahead and put a link here, some links I should say, to more videos on this channel and videos on my other channel where we're just goofing around, making funny stuff and having a good time. We just tried some vegan jerky, so feel free to go and watch that ridiculousness. And that's really all I have to say. Thanks for coming by. I'll see you all tomorrow.